If you're a retail business in the United States, then you probably have to collect sales tax. Now, there are some caveats on that, and remember, I'm not giving advice. You need to check that out with your local taxing agency, but usually it's on products and not services, and usually it's on retail, not wholesale. Then sometimes there are other things like food that can't be charged. If you are collecting sales tax, then that's definitely a process you want to keep track of. In this chapter, we'll talk about how QuickBooks can accept sales tax, how it can set it up correctly for all of the different agencies that you have, how it can be applied to either products or services or customers or sales or all of the above, and then of course how you're going to go about paying that to the relative agencies. That's really the important part because you don't want to owe money to the IRS or your other taxing authority. So let's go ahead and take a look at sales tax. One of the things that most of us get to do as business owners is to collect sales tax, and I'm ready to take care of that with QuickBooks. Fortunately, once I get it set up, QuickBooks does most of the work. It's really automated and there's only a couple of things that I need to do. But we need to go through and make sure that we have it set up correctly to begin with. This actually begins with the Preferences dialog. So I'm working in the file that I've been working with all along. If you're just joining in, you can find a file that will work in the Chapter 15 folder. Once you get that open, we're going to go up to Edit and down to Preferences and to the Sales Tax category near the lower left side. There aren't any personal preferences, but we do need to set it up for the company as a whole. And really, almost all of the configuration of the tax itself happens in the Preferences dialog. So this is an important place to know. First of all, do you charge sales tax? If you don't, for example, if you're a services-only business, you can say no, and that's all you have to do with it. You're done. If you say yes, then it might get a little bit more complicated as far as who you need to charge tax to and for what items. We're going to go ahead and set up just a couple of different things. Sales tax is an item, and each one that you need to charge for needs to be an item. So if you pay just a state sales tax, then you will have one item entry. You'll also have one agency to which you pay. If you charge for maybe a state, a city, and another jurisdiction, you could have one item. Maybe you pay it all to one agency and they divvy it up, or you could have 3 separate items or any combination thereof. So you have to do that for yourself because unfortunately we can't tell you exactly what it's going to be for your location. I'm in Idaho, and so I get to do something fairly simple. I'm going to click the Add Sales Tax Item button. It's going to open a little window, and I'm going to create a new item, just like I've done for inventory and services and those types of things, except this is categorized as a sales tax item. I'll give it a name, and it makes sense that my name is Idaho State Sales Tax. Then, of course, we need to know what the tax rate is, and for Idaho currently it's 6%. And then the taxing agency is the Idaho State Tax Commission. That's all there is to getting the first one set up. I'll say OK. The Idaho State Tax Commission hasn't been set up. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick add, but since they are an agency to whom you'll probably be sending checks, most of the time you're going to want to go through the full setup so that you have their address and contact information in there. I'm just going to click on Quick Add at the moment. It brings us back to our box because we just saved the Idaho State Tax Commission. Now we'll click OK again, and that brings us back to our preferences. So there's one. In Idaho, we actually don't have county or city taxes, but just to show you how you could layer these, I'm going to create a second sales tax item, and it's still an item. And this time I'm going to say that this is actually a county tax for Ada County. Press my tab key a couple of times. It's 1.5%. And it's paid to the Ada County Commissioner. Once again, I'll say OK, do a quick add, OK again, and I'm back to my box. What I currently have are 2 separate taxes, but here's the way sales tax plays out in our scenario. If you live in the state of Idaho, you pay Idaho tax. If you also live in Ada County, which encompasses probably 5 or 6 different cities and towns, then you pay both the Idaho tax and the Ada County tax. Because I need to have a group of taxes, instead of listing each of those individually, I'm actually going to create a tax group made up of both Ada County tax and Idaho state tax. I do it the same way by clicking Add Sales Tax Item, but this time I designate it as a sales tax group instead of an item. And I'm going to call this one Ada County Residents. Because this is a grouped item, I have to fill in all of the different portions or items that are part of it. It's going to be the Ada County sales tax and the Idaho state sales tax. So 1.5% for Ada County, 6% for Idaho, for a total of 7.5% if they happen to live in Idaho and in Ada County. By doing it this way, I'm actually going to be able to differentiate between funds I've taken in for Ada County and the Idaho state sales tax so I can pay them to the proper authorities. On an invoice, somebody would only be invoiced as the group for 7.5% instead of individually. Now I'll say OK. Takes me back to my box, and then one more little thing to do. It says, what is your most common sales tax item? Ada County, Idaho State, out of state, or Ada County residents, which is my group. I'm going to say that actually my most common is just Idaho State. This just makes a default on things like invoices, but I can always change it on a person by person, invoice by invoice, or item by item basis. The bottom of this box talks about sales tax codes. They determine if the items we sell are taxable or non-taxable. And this is perfect for me because I sell both. My training services are not taxable. My training products are taxable. So the taxable item code says tax, and they're identified as T for taxable when printing. Non-taxable items say non next to them. The last thing we have to tell QuickBooks so it knows when we need to process this stuff is when do we owe our tax. As of the invoice date, that's if we're using accrual accounting methods, or only when I get the payment, which would be the cash basis. I use accrual basis accounting, so I'm going to say as of the invoice date, I owe Ada County and the state of Idaho taxes, whether I've been actually paid or not. I think you can now see one of the disadvantages of using accrual-based accounting. And lastly, when do we owe this? Is it monthly, quarterly, or annually? That really can vary depending on the size of your company and where you live. I'm going to pay sales tax monthly. Once I have that all configured, I can say OK. Brings me back to my home screen, and basically that's all of the setup there is. It's all done from within the Preferences dialog.